let's say they miss the playoffs, and Jim Harbaugh tells Jed York, I would be willing to come back for $15 million a year and coach this team. We got unfinished business. I like this roster. I like Trey Lance. I could turn this team into a Super Bowl champion. Do you think Jed York could say no to that?
Gosh, I don't know. There were so many issues with Harbaugh. I would have paid
players getting arrested.
I would have paid $100 to sit next to Jim Harbaugh yesterday at the game because he was there, right?
Oh yeah.
Did he stay for the whole game?
I'm sure he did.
I would have loved to have heard his thought. I mean, I will say this: I thought the team under Harbaugh had a great coaching staff. Wherever Jim goes, he has an elite coaching staff.
He would bring Fangio back with him. He would.
Lots of coaches want to coach for Jim
Mike
Harbaugh.
Solari. Yeah.
We might have our opinions. Everybody has it. In the coaching profession, coaches want to coach under Jim Harbaugh.
Tom Rathman.
There's all kinds of guys. Michigan's got great coaches. I mean, he gets great coaches. So that's one thing. The question is, how does it wear over time? Does Jim wear people out? I think that the real problem with Jim the first time around was that the beginning, like John and Kyle are a tandem and they're tied together. Jim came in and took the offer to take on Trent Baalke, but then within a week told Jed, I don't want Trent Baalke. And then I think ultimately that got back to Trent Baalke. And so there was a frostiness between Jim and Trent that existed almost the entire tenure of Harbaugh. If it was a little bit more, there was more continuity based between the head coach and the GM, I think
that's what John Lynch does here. That's what John Lynch is all about. So I think they would be an interesting combo. And I think one thing about Harbaugh, I mean, I covered him then. I spoke with him yesterday. He was about 50 when he took that job. He's 60 now. There's a difference between 50 and 60. He's just a little bit more mellowed out. And he's been doing a good job with Michigan. I feel like he's a little different. He's a little different, and I think he's a lot like Pete Carroll, who frankly is a hell of a coach, as he's demonstrating this year. What he's doing with Geno Smith, Kyle Shanahan, eat your heart out.
But, there were issues, though, Grant. I mean, they could not get plays called on time. They lost the Super Bowl because of Jim Harbaugh calling a timeout with an old Ravens defense on their heels and huffing and puffing, and they called the timeout and let them get to catch their breath.
It's true. But I do think that he has improved in the last 10 years, and I don't think Kyle Shanahan has improved in the last 5. I think this team is made to order for Jim. I would prefer to go after Ken Dorsey. But Ken Dorsey probably is going to have his pick. I mean, if the Chargers fire Brandon Staley and say, hey, Ken, you want to be the head coach of Justin Herbert, I don't see how he turns that down. Harbaugh might be the Niners' best option. And if they have to choose between Kyle and Harbaugh, I think I would go with Harbaugh.
It's hard to look away from 44-19-1. It's also hard to forget all. I was in the room the end of the season, last game, when he dropped the "Who's Got It Better Than Us," and I heard crickets that day. Okay. I mean, I was in that room. I shouldn't have been in that room, but somehow the media relations guy let me in that kind of in-between hallway between the outside and the locker room. And so I'm standing right there, and he dropped the "Who's Got It Better Than Us," and it was like, So I don't know how he wears on players over time.
How does Kyle wear on players over time?
I don't know that either, too. I mean, I don't know. I'll say this, Jim, they're totally different personalities. But Jim, I mean, I think Jim as a quarterback guru, Jim as an offensive play caller, Jim as a leader, I like. Jim is a tough guy, as a coaching staff. There's attributes I like about Jim. But Jim
revived Alex Smith. Jim gave Alex Smith a career. Alex Smith was going down the tubes, and he saved his career. And then he had success with Colin Kaepernick, which no one else was able to do. So when you compare his resume to Kyle, I mean, he's a much more positive, uplifting coach than Kyle, even though he wears on people. Dude, Kyle is the most negative coach I've ever covered. He's relentlessly negative. Jim Harbaugh was the guy pumping you up and hitting you in the head. I mean, there's a charm to him that Kyle lacks. I mean, Kyle's charm was wearing Yeezys, which isn't even that charming anymore in 2022. You might
I don't know how I feel. I really don't know how I feel about Kyle, because I think Kyle's offense seems to be way more explosive, but then some of the play calling seems to be really kind of questionable, and it seems like they've hit a wall. Like right now, what's the next adjustment? What's the
it was Christian McCaffrey
Ram game? What's this Ram game going to look like?
It's going to look like the Rams not scoring any points and making the Niners feel good about themselves because the Rams are even worse. I swear, the Seahawks and Cardinals might be the two best teams in this NFC West. Everyone's focused on the Niners and Rams. The Rams are horrible. They're so bad. They can't score points. Sean McVay might be an even bigger fraud than Kyle.
The Rams' offensive line is a problem. The Rams' offensive line is a problem for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't have a good offensive line. The Rams are thin. The Rams are a thin football team. 49ers are an injured football team.
You said that with Harbaugh, like Kyle's offense is more explosive. In the past, this year the problem with Kyle is that his offense isn't scoring points. And what you always would say is, look, Harbaugh was a good leader, but his offense, I mean, Greg Roman and his offense has had problems. Kyle has a better offense. I want that offense. Now he can't even hang his hat on that anymore. So Kyle better turn something around. Otherwise, there could be less. I mean, we don't even know if Harbaugh wants the job. Can I just say that? He might be like, you know what? No picks. Jed York. I'm good. I like Michigan. I'll just stay right here. That's possible. I don't even know if he wants the job. So I guess it's all theoretical.
Yeah, I mean, he's had a lot of success at Michigan. He's gotten over the hump by beating Ohio State. He probably can stay as long as he wants just because of that one singular win. They're undefeated this year. He's a really good football coach that attracts a lot of good assistant coaches.
He's really good.
My question is he ideally suited to the college game where guys graduate and then they move on after a few years?
But hold on. Let's stick with this because I keep comparing Harbaugh to Pete Carroll. I think they're very similar. And with Pete Carroll, this is what Richard Sherman said about Pete Carroll. Oh, you know, not that he wears on people, but he's kind of corny and you hear the same stories all the time.
There's some rah-rah stuff.
Yeah, you hear the same stuff and eventually you tune him out. Well, you know what? Goodbye, Richard. Goodbye, veterans. Oh, it doesn't. Well, let me get some young guys who are inspired by a good coach. That's maybe what probably the Niners should have done back in 2014. Instead of getting rid of Harbaugh, get rid of like Alex Boone and some of these vets that have a problem with him and Trent Baalke and let Harbaugh rebuild, considering he wins 3/4 of his games. I mean, that's what the Seahawks did with Pete Carroll, and they were right to do it, even though they had a lot of pressure to run him out of town locally in Seattle. Remember that?
What's amazing to me about the whole Harbaugh regime is that there's so much pressure to win in the NFL, and he was 44-19-1, and you got rid of him.
Unreal.
That's what that one's odd. But yeah. I don't know how much of this to put on Kyle this year, because is it the loss of McDaniel? Is it the lack of a speed back? Is it the inconsistencies on the offensive line? Is it, and this last game yesterday, I got a bigger problem with the 44 than the 23. Way bigger problem with the 44 points they allowed.
I have an equally big problem with
both
of them. I have an equally big problem with both of them. And the problem I have a bigger problem with the offense because the defense is the first bad game they've had all season, and it was against the Chiefs. I can forgive one bad game against the Chiefs. The offense, this is what they do every freaking week. And yeah, they lost McDaniel, but they also lost Wes Welker. They lost Rich Scangarello. They lost Embry. They replaced a lot of their assistant coaches on the offense, and maybe the guys that Kyle Shanahan hired to replace him aren't getting it done. He has had very good assistant coaches on this team, but they've all gotten hired elsewhere and promoted, and maybe he hasn't been able to replace them well enough this year. I don't know.
Here's the most amazing thing from yesterday to me. The 49ers had more first downs.
Oh.
What does that tell you? It tells you that Kansas City had explosives all day, all night. I mean, it was like the 49ers led the NFL in the limit of the number of explosive 10-yard plays they'd allowed coming into yesterday. Yesterday, every play was an explosive. Chiefs had explosive plays up and down the field.
Oh, that just shows you that they hadn't faced an explosive quarterback yet. No disrespect to Geno Smith, who the Niners did shut down.